Here we are, folks. It's Brother Peter with tidbits from the Word. We're going to look in the book of Proverbs. There are 30 of them. If you would read a proverb every day, you'll read through the Proverbs 12 times in a year. If you would read different things every day, you can read through them 12 times in a year. But Proverbs is a book of instruction. It's a book of short sentences drawn from long experiences of the people who were the writers in here. Now remember, God chose every writer in the Bible. Every single writer, even if there's a bad one, God chose that bad one. And he chose us. Many of us are not very good most of the time, but he chose us anyway. And so, but we see in Proverbs 2, there are several authors in this book of Proverbs. Solomon himself, chapter 1 verse 24, we're told that in 1 Kings 4 and 32, that he wrote 3,000 Proverbs. And you know, I believe that in that world to come, that millennial reign that we're going to be in, we're going to be part of, but there'll be a group of people there, that God will probably reveal the other part of the Proverbs that Solomon wrote. Right here, we only have 30. We only have 30 of them here. So there are many of them that we don't know about and we haven't heard. They were composed over 1,000 songs, and however, chapters 1 through 24 contain only a fraction of this number. Just a fraction of the number. The men, Hezekiah, in 25 and 29. And then we have a man, his name is Agar. And I've asked this several times. And then we have a guy named Lemuel. He wrote 31. I asked this several times. If God's writing a new Bible for the new heaven and the new earth that are coming after the 1,000-year millennial reign, there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. If God was writing a Bible for that new heaven and that new earth, and he was going to populate it with people again, would what you say or do or write or preach or teach, would it be showing up in that earth? Would it be in a Bible? Because we're going to be on an earth with no sin. With no sin. So sin is not going to be the big object to preach about in that period of time, Lord willing. But during the 1,000-year reign, now sin is still going to be come about. And perhaps after the big Holocaust that's going to be on this earth just before the time in, maybe all the Bibles will be burned. Maybe all of the Bibles that are here today will be burned, and God will use another word besides this word. He'll use this word. There'll be some come up. They'll be starting to get printed again. Suppose that almost all Christian literature during the 3 or 3.5 years of Holocaust on this earth get burned and get displaced. Hey, if a man who hates God could find my library, he'd burn it up. I've got well over 1,000 Christian books and Christian things in my library. The book tells a story, and it paints pictures, and it paints a picture for a young man in particular, starting out in life. His first lesson is given in 2 schools. Let's look at chapter 1 and verse 7. It said, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." Did we all not come over Fool's Hill? Yes, we have. And we have made problems even for our later life for things that we did in our younger life. Right now on the TV on a daily basis, we see men accused of something they did even when they were younger. having to leave high-paying jobs, good everything, because of something they did when they were in high school. Something they did maybe even in grammar school. And it's followed them to the grave and knocked them out of positions for something they did back then that now is considered heinous in a way, yet the perversion today is 1 million times, we say, worse than it ever was in our younger days. The key word of Proverbs, of course, is wisdom. Now, this word wisdom is the queen of words. Wisdom is the queen of words in our vocabulary today. She is one of the best words you'll ever hear. And she's going to be called her throughout the book of Proverbs. When you see the word her, generally is talking about wisdom. 2 and 8, let's look at it. Chapter 2 and verse 8. You need to, by the way, you need to pause your machine right now. Get your pen, a pencil, or a pad, and your Bible. And write down if you want to follow Brother Peter and follow these verses. We're going to look at chapter 2 and verse 8. And it says here, He keepeth the path of judgment, and preserveth the way of his saints. Okay, now we switch from the word wisdom as she to God himself. He's the one that keeps the path. He's the one that does it. And he does it through this word wisdom. Wisdom of the Bible, knowledge of the Bible. Wisdom will direct her students. Chapter 3 and 5 through 6. Let's look at that. And it said, Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not to thine own understanding. What is she doing? She's pointing us to the Lord. Wisdom is pointing us to the Lord. So trust in the Lord, and in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord, and depart from evil. What are you striving for today? Are you striving for majesty in the Lord today? Or are you striving for health, wealth, and welfare and all of the stuff, and piling up things in a bank, or piling up things today for security? That thieves will break in and steal. One of the most foolish things I've ever heard of is somebody said, well, I got everything on my computer. My whole life is on my computer. Everything where I got stuff and all that. Hey, there are people today can get into your computer, find out exactly where you are, who you are, and what you've got, and know how to take it. Wisdom will perfect her students. Chapter 4 and verse 8. Let's take a look at that. We're walking through the Proverbs here. Chapter 4 and verse 8. Exalt her, and she shall promote thee. She shall bring thee to honor when thou embrace her. Embrace wisdom. And wisdom. Look, think before you speak. I've always been one to shoot my mouth off too soon. I've had to learn since I got saved to think before I speak. Now I ask God, what would you have me say? Sometimes I don't, but most of the time I try to do that. And so look at this. There are several classic pages in the book of warnings. This is a book of warnings. It's a book of many, many things. But one of the things it is a book of warnings. In chapter 1, backing up to that, we had in verse 20 in chapter 1, we had this warning here in 20, that thou mayest walk in the ways of good men and keep the paths of righteousness. Keeping the paths of righteousness. And I'm not going to read all the verses because it goes all the way to 31. Because this chapter right here is a chapter of warnings that tells us that how to walk in that way. There are rewards for wisdom. Chapter 3, 5, and 6. If you'll trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct thy paths. And then he said here in verse 6, he will direct thy paths. But you must be in. It's kind of like sitting in the seat of a car and you want to move. You have to press the gas pedal in order to go. Well, you have to have communion with God. You have to be in the driver's seat with God, and you have to let him do it for you. And in the energy of wisdom, 6 and 6. Let's look at chapter 6 and verse 6 right quick. As we walk through the pages of God's Word, chapter 6 and 6. Go to the ant, thou sluggard. Whoa, we. Consider her ways and be wise, which having no guide over her or ruler, preserveth her meat in the summer, and gathereth her food in the harvest. How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou rise from thy sleep? Wow. He's saying, be wise. Be wise. Many times in my life, I have spent my last farthing or the last penny I had heading into a week. Gonna need gas. Gonna need many things. But not wise with the finances that I had. And the Bible said, look at the ant now. The ant's wise. The ant is a smart thing. He says, the godless whore, talking about somebody, not necessarily, even though he uses a woman here, not necessarily a woman. The Bible asks in some places, will a man go whoring? Yes, he will, after the world. This is a man after he's saved. He has to be careful. Will he go out and go whoring after the world? He sees his neighbor get a new car. Yet he can't afford a new car. But all of his friends are getting new cars. So he goes out and signs the paper and gets a new car. And he doesn't make enough money to make the payments. So he has done wrong for himself and his family and caused great grief in his life because he went after the things of the world when God had him being comfortable where he was. A godly wife, 10 through chapter 31, 10 through 31. God gave me a godly wife. I've been married 54 years, 55 next month. And God gave me a godly wife. I wouldn't have made it where I am today. I'd already been dead and gone. Hadn't been for this woman. And then he said, do not be a riotous rebel. In chapter 30, 11 through 14. I've been there. I lived there. For many years, I lived as a riotous rebel. With alcohol, wild life, everything that under the sun was in it. If I named it all, the police would probably come get me today and put me in jail. Therefore, we've been there. We know that. The Proverbs is the Old Testament equivalent of the Epistle of James in the New Testament. Mark that down. Take your pencil. Write down Book of James. Get the little book out. You can read it in 15 minutes or less. And it tells you an outline that you need to live by. It's impossible to offer a chronological outline of this book. At least 11 main subjects are discussed. I have a list that I've done in another book that I did a study of those 11 things that are in him. The memory of the just is blessed, but the name of the wicked shall rot. I know, and throughout my life, I can tell you many hundreds of people I've known that are dead in the grave right now. They're not here. But I can't quote the names of most of them. But I've had some Christian friends that are in the grave right now, and I can quote many of them. I can tell you who they are. And they're gone to heaven. But that name of that lost person, or that person that went to hell, is forgotten. And so, as they've been deceased. And a good man is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver or gold. We've all been through that, striving for silver and gold. That is futile. There's no profit in it at the end of it, especially in today's world that we live in. Everybody's knocking on your door. Wherever you've got your money, wherever you've got your stuff, everybody's knocking on the door. They're wanting to get it. If you think these movies of these fellas breaking into a bank and breaking open all of the little lock boxes in the safe and getting everything from those lock boxes, if you think that's a fallacy, if you think that couldn't happen, you're thinking wrong. If you got all your junk in a lock box and you're going to die and leave it, even the family can't find it many times. And eventually, 20, 30 years down the road, they say, well, we're going to open this box and disperse it. And the government will end up with it. And none of the family even knew about it. You kept it hid. And so all that kind of stuff is foolishness. You could get it out and use it today. You could get it out and disperse it among your family rather than leave it in a locked box. What a shame, what a sin and a shame for people to have thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank. And they could, listen, if you're a saved person, the only thing you're going to have in heaven is what you send up there. Oh yes, you're going to have your soul. I asked Jesus, forgive me of my sin, come in my heart and save my soul. And my soul's going to be in heaven. Am I going to have anything else there? Not unless I send it up there. The Bible's very clear about that. Some will go to heaven saved so as by fire. They just made it in because they asked Jesus to forgive them of their sin, but they haven't got a single solitary thing. They've kept their fist wrapped around their belongings and their stuff. And I listen, I've been a paint contractor for years. I work for people that have got an attic. You can't get in it. Why can't you get in it? Everything they've had from the day they started gathering junk is stuck in the attic, in sheds outside, in barns. If a person would calculate, they put a little shed out there behind their house and filled it with their junk, and their taxes went up $25, $30 a year. Well, in 10 years, that's $2,500. Think about it. And to keep a bunch of junk. And so it's futile. Anyway, you're not going to have anything in heaven if you don't put it there. And those passages, there are several classic passages in the book about that. Proverbs is the only Testament equivalent of the Epistle of James. It is impossible to offer a chronological outline of the book unless we've got these 11 main things, and that's what we're in right now, these 11 main things. A wise youth will listen to his father, but an unwise youth will mock. He'll be a mocker of what his father said. Chapter 13 and verse 1, let's look at it. Chapter 13, over here. We're jumping way over here. the 13 and verse 1. And he says here, wise son heareth his father's instruction, but a scorner heareth not rebuke. I'm afraid that many, many times in my young life, I didn't hear rebuke. I was a scorner. And I lived 30 years. I lived 30 years of a terrible, terrible, hard life. Mean life, miserable life. Made other people miserable and mean around me. And did that. And then one day, God said, your number's up. 3 o'clock in the morning, November 5th, 1972. Drunk, played cards for a weekend and was drunk, wrecked my car. God took his finger and put it right there and said, your number's up. You either get right now, or I'm not speaking to you again. God spoke to me then. I said, Lord, I'm a sinner. Forgive me of my sin. Come in my heart and save my soul. Been saved ever since then. That's November 5th at 3 o'clock in the morning, 1972. Did a complete turnaround. Started following what the Proverbs say. He that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him many times, or betimes. Chasten thy son while there is hope, and let not thy soul spare for his crying. Today, that's a thing of the past. Today, parents holler a little bit, say, I don't know what I'm going to do with that child. I can't correct it. I can't do anything. No, you let him get away with too much too soon. When he was 1 year old and you told him don't touch that coffee table and he touched it, you should have put a good spat on his bottom. And everything else he did that was bad from the time he was 1 until the time he was 6, put another good spat on his bottom every time he did something. And at the end of that, he's going to know that he's got to follow the rules. Otherwise, you're raising a fool, and he's going to be a disgrace to you, himself, and everybody else. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. If you're training him properly, he'll not depart from it. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. Wow. We have parents today that never heard that. We have parents today that have never been in the Bible. We have parents today that have never met God yet. And they have no idea how to raise a child. And they've got houses full of them. That's why the penal system is overrun with people today. Because of children being raised helter-skelter with no direction in their life. Withhold not correction from the child. For if thou beatest him with a rod, he shall not die, shall deliver his soul from hell. How about that? You know something? I got lickings when I needed beatings. I got lickings when I was a kid, and I kind of got out of there and went for a few minutes, and then I kind of laughed about it. Well, that wasn't too bad. I got away pretty light. I got me 3 or 4 stripes with a belt, and that was the end of that. That wasn't too bad. Now I go out and do something foolish again. I should have got beat with a rod and brought into correction. All right. The 8th and 9th thing, we would have to go look at the scriptures, and there's many words for them in chapter 8 and chapter 9. Let's get to business matters. The average person that's watching PH Tidbits or listening to it are probably in business of some type. God hates a dishonest scale and delights in honesty. I heard a good one time. Brother Ralph Taylor told it. Back here about 30 years ago, about the guy who was bringing butter in. And he was trading it with a man for, we'll say, salt pork. And the guy that was bringing the butter in, he started slighting the man just a little bit on the butter. It was a little bit under the pound. A little bit under the pound. It got to be a little bit more and a little bit more under the pound. So one day he noticed that his salt pork was a little bit under the pound. And a little bit more under the pound. And he asked the fellow, he said, "Hey, this salt pork is not weighing up a pound. You're slighting me on it. What are you using for a counterweight?" And the fellow told him, he said, "I'm using your butter for a counterweight." Showing us that what we do in life's going to come back at us. Are you giving a weight, a proper scale? When you make a deal with somebody, are you keeping it? I've been buying some bricks from a fellow, and the count doesn't seem to ever add up to what it's supposed to. It's short all the time. And so, look, we've got to keep a good scale. Don't sign a note for someone if you barely know. I did that. Brother Ralph Taylor told me back in, I don't know, 78, 79. I took a big job. I had 2 trucks. I had 2 sets of ladders. I was a paint contractor. I took on a partner. Brother Ralph said, "Make sure he's a saved man now, Pete." To make this long story short, the big job that I took, he ended up with the job, he ended up with my truck, he ended up collecting the money, and I ended up with nothing because he wasn't a saved man. I had to give him half of my business because I took him on as a full half partner. A foolish act. So, and don't withhold payment on a debt. Have you got some debt that's not paid? I'm sad to say I sat here today and the Lord brings to my mind a couple of debts in my life that haven't been retired that I've got to work on. And perhaps I'll be able to here not long from now. And so, God will not let a good man strive to death. Chapter 10 and verse 3. Let's take a look at that. Chapter 10 and verse 3. The Lord will not suffer the soul of the righteous to famish, but he causeth away the substance. He curseth the way of the substance of a wicked man. But he'll bless the way of a godly man. He'll be blessed. And so, riches can disappear fast. A king's crown doesn't stay in his family forever. So watch your business interests closely. Know the state of your flock. Know your herds. That's know your people. There's a bunch of people you got working for you. Know them. And then if you have outside of those people working in your main business, you have people, truck drivers, people out there, salesmen, people out there doing. Know them. Know your herds. Know everything. There will be lamb's wool enough for clothing and goat's milk enough for food for all your household after the hay harvest and the new crop appears and the mountain grass are gathered. Now what he's saying, in this modern day and age, we don't have our herds out on the pasture. But he's relating that which we do to hay. If you don't have a crop of hay come up and you got cows, you got problems. You got to have a crop of hay come up. You got to tend your pastures. If you don't watch it, somebody will throw a cigarette butt in your pasture and burn your hair. And that's the same way it is no matter what kind of business you're in. Somebody will come along today and get what your business puts out if you don't watch it. So you have to be careful. We're going to stop right there. We're not going to go into the marriage matters deal. But I think I'll probably hit that marriage matters on the next excerpt. That's one of the most important things we have. Like I said, I've been married 54 years. I gave my wife literally hell on earth for the first 15 years we were married. And then I got saved. And been trying to make up for it ever since. But even when I was a whoremonger and a hell runner, she was faithful to me and truthful and did the housework, kept everything neat and clean. Yes, we were poor, but she kept everything looking nice, neat and clean. She took care of the kids. She cooked and sewed and washed, did all the things that a good woman would do. She's been a perfectly good woman for all those years. And in 54 years, we're down at the gate today, right now. We're in final stages of cancer with her. She's going to be going to heaven, perhaps before me, maybe not. We don't know what a day brings. The Lord may come on the scene, and that'd be that. And that'd be the end of that. And we'd all be in heaven. So that can happen. So, this is Brother Peter with Tidbits. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.